Okay. Hello, everyone. The title of tonight's episode is When Knowledge Stares at the Unknown. And so, one of the greatest challenges of our species is how our societies evolve. And our societies function based on the greatest knowledge accessible. When I was younger, I had this mindset where I find many human beings, just pretty much all of us do, where once we find a sort of solution, we apply, or once we find a certain potential for a solution, we apply the information given. As if when information comes to the child, it has to do something with it, or the information will not be kept relevant. So anything, when you look at yourself in the mirror and you see how you are in form, how you are a formed creature, you look at this physicalness and you see within this physicalness, there's this profound self awareness, ascribing value. It's as if when I kind of look at my life, it has been a sort of progression through different moments and experiences where, as much as the world was being updated, the self that I felt I was in the world was also being updated, but it had the weight of its own decision making and responsibility and shaping process, you know? So, pretty much what I'm trying to get to is that knowledge is a sort of technology that we as creatures utilize. When I say knowledge, it is the vastness of how far our species, in every branch of knowledge it has categorized and created, how far it has seen through, in some sense. Anytime anything wants to update, all it has to do was become self-aware. This is a kind of sort of fear in our society about future technology such as AI, such as robots becoming self-aware, and then what would their decision making be? What would their conclusion of reality be once they are a player in that game? And this is the phenomenal thing, where it's as if we have been awakened into existence. At least that's how it feels for me, because when I wonder about my earliest dream and I wonder about my earliest memory, I can't like, how can I tell you? It's as if matter is a vehicle being driven by intelligence that seems to be higher dimensional if we consider the lower dimensions based on duality and light. So pretty much we are light-based creatures. Without light, there's no world to see. There's no requirement to evolve. And so I find this very fascinating, the structure of just our solar system, how there's this sun where its light is going to all these different planets, and creatures are simply growing because of this intelligence. Do you see? Because of this light reaching the planet. Do you see? It's as if um, it's very interesting because we do not know what it means beyond our sensory perception. And so everything is limited into it. And normality is the capital of our sensory perception, because normality doesn't want change. And the future will always be strange to the past. There's this ancient Persian poet. I often share his quotes because I find his wisdom is kind of like somebody needs to pass it on, you know. Rumi simply says in one of his poetry, he was a very simple man from like 7 or 8 years ago. And this man said, a bird needs two wings to fly. Similarly, your mind requires chaos in order to function. Your reality requires the known and the unknown. Your individual aspect of existence is based on the known. It's based on structure. Your, in some sense, let me say, collective aspect, that hidden self, your, or some people call it higher self, some people call it the self with the third eye, you know, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it soul, you know, spirit or whatever. Like, it's fine, whatever word you give it, but it doesn't matter, because it is the aspect of your intelligence that functions through the unknown, and the unknown will come across as chaos, and it is the greatest fear of order that within its nature it is driven to chaos. Do you see? And it's a very huge challenge, because we are creatures that are very fragile if we just base our meaning on a story. Narratives can become very empty if they are not recreated. Do you know? It's as if humanity is this giant storytelling project where first human beings are telling stories to themselves about themselves, and once they agree to that, they allow that to solidify. They begin, in some sense, engaging with the story of the world and the story of society and what is to come and what is to pass. And so this is why I find people, like I've always seen, like we are creatures designed to want to sacrifice ourselves for the greatness of our species. Do you know what I mean? Like it is in our nature. It is in our nature, because we somehow feel we are contributing to the continuity of something that is so far the mainstream. It took us billions of years to evolve, 4 billion years to get here. Do you see this science project is, you know, it should be taken care of, you know? And there is much that we don't know. And so this is where the beautiful part of the talk comes, that in order for our future society to be advanced beyond the problems that we're experiencing currently, it must acknowledge a reality that has either handled those problems or a reality that never had those problems in the first place. Imagine suddenly there comes this command just heard on the planet. Every human being just gets this inner calling, and they realize in every moment it is the opportunity to present greatness. And what does greatness mean? Greatness, I thought at first it was like just having a huge influence. Honestly, when I was younger, because I would play chess, I thought greatness was like incredible conquering ability. And I'm telling you, I was so wrong. I was so wrong. Because we feel like we have to take our survival from this world. We have to find a way to survive. We gotta get by. But at the same time, there's the opportunity cost of how we survive, and how we could have survived. Do you see? It's as if, like, imagine you suddenly could look through the eyes of your future self and see all the unnecessary things that you're doing now. Because time travel was never too like a foreign concept. For me, time, the word, I'm like, okay, let's see where the word comes from, and I realized a lot of what is real to me is based on how well I've paid attention to the world. Do you see? A lot of how your emotions come to you are based on how you've comprehended this whole existential situation we're all in, right? And I feel that the species is getting distracted. It is getting distracted by a sort of self-entertainment. Do you see? As if we are getting lazy because we are forgetting why we are alive. And if evolution is the reason we're alive, that means we can't always expect the past to know where it's going. You can't always try to have 100% certainty in what you do, because life is not a story. and certainty actually traps you in one. I fell into that when I was younger. And when I say when I was younger, like, how can I tell you? I feel as a kid like I had this kind of like I had some very beautiful experiences in nature when I was young. Okay, just being in the garden and just being in nature. And I perceived this sort of divine elegance. I could tell you the same, this, like sometimes when I look at mathematics and I see how there's certain ratios and certain numbers, you know, for example, how there's irrational numbers and these go on infinitely, and that has a sort of strange mathematical beauty to it. You know, that similar elegance I saw also in nature prior to mathematics. I saw that life moves in ways where it allows it, it's as if different spheres, just like how there's different, you know, particles, like different atoms, you know, all like together, you know, similarly, we're all different moments of intelligence. Do you see? And so the kind of like most complex question, one of those chaotic questions that I remember I asked myself was that what if it's all empty? What if there's no point to life? And so, with that mentality, I realized what life is being judged in a changing universe. Can I know the state of the planet when it's changing all the time? Can I know who I am when I'm changing all the time? And so, emptiness became a sort of meaningless uncertainty, too. This is how you kind of dodge the bullet of nihilism. You realize emptiness cannot exist with the concept of fullness. It is again the same idea. A bird needs two wings to fly. Your story of life and story of certainty and uncertainty and knowledge and the unknown, all of this is based on how much your attention is being a reality in your awareness. Because let me tell you, there's something very unique. As I'm speaking to you right now, there is a level of my intelligence that's just being. Like I don't have to do anything. It's just already being. And then there's a level of my intelligence where I can do things. I can administer it. And my hand can move towards a bottle of iced tea and drink from it. But underneath this, I find that we pretty much we have to find our way. It's like the first alien that we have to try making contact with is not a physical alien. It is the concept of the unknown. It is the philosophical implications that are found in the unknown. This is why philosophy is a kind of bodyguard of religion. Because like religion is like sets certain ideas of deep like value, deep narrative, you know, as if there's a creator to the universe, you know. Can you imagine being a farmer back in the day, never thinking about anything, just, you know, plowing crops, and then somebody runs up to you, it's like, yo, man, yo, I just heard the craziest thing. And that farmer's like, you know, very calm and peaceful. It's like, what is it? You know, and then the guy says, yo, man, I just heard there's a God. There's a creator, and it's God. You know, there's a person who's running this whole world, you know? And so that farmer in that moment was suddenly found in a crossroads of having to accept a certain framework over the administration of the intelligence of the universal sector or to not. And either way, it doesn't matter. Because matter, once it's changing, isn't matter. So now I want to get into some interesting notions, something that personally entered my life that I kind of feel maybe I should share. It has to do with a sort of, let's say, a jewel, a pearl of wisdom I found through Buddhic teachings. And so this is how it was, where first actually, like, I had this very strange experience. Okay. Okay, this is, let me tell you this. This is probably in like 2011, you know. Excuse me. pretty much for like 2 days, I'm visiting my cousin in Berlin. You know, me and my brother are visiting my cousin in Berlin. And what happens is that we meet his friend who is a Qigong master named Stefan, you know. And we're all, at some point, we attend the Qigong class and whatever, and then we go to this pizza place and we're eating food. And this guy was like some very, like, he had a strange presence. He was the most peaceful person there, you know, like very in control and peaceful, as if like he was conscious of the energy of his moment in a way where I wasn't at the time, you know. And so this man suddenly, it's like I see him, like while I'm eating pizza, I see him staring, and I'm like, oh my god, does this guy want the pizza or something? You know. And then he suddenly says something in German to my cousin, to my older cousin, and my older cousin later on tells me, he said that he said something. The guy saw me and he thought I was like some, like, you know, wise sage with a white beard, like, you know, years ago or something, you know. And honestly, like that information came to me, but there was no place for me to integrate it. So I kind of heard it in one ear and it left through the other, you know. But anyways, later on, years later, now this is what I'm getting to, the pearl of wisdom from Eastern mysticism in some sense, you know. I got introduced to Lao Tzu, who was Confucius's teacher. And Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching. And in the Tao Te Ching, the first sentence of it says the Tao that can be spoken about is not the real Taos. And I'm a person right now, Mr.Within, speaking about the Tao. So whatever I say, take it as the fingers pointing to the star, not the star. The star has to be accessed by your own experience. So Lao Tzu brought up this concept of Tao and this concept of silence. And he was a person who he would go on these like long silent walks in nature, you know. And so this Tao, I noticed it was something I had experienced from the beginning of my existence. It was that prime intelligent mover within my eyes that I had in some sense constantly built relationships around. And when you as a being stop building relationships over a world that's already happening with its own intelligence, that's when you begin to see things as they are. And it may be chaotic. It may be something that you never expected. And if you are to attend the unexpected, you know, you cannot have expectations. So all these people trying to get enlightened, I don't know what you're doing, you know, spiritual communities around the world, you know. The Tao came to me as the intersection of the questions and answers that I had been given to life. I realized the story of who I am is hollow, but not the awareness to the story. I realized the identity that I had and I've had, and it's been changing as much as the cells of your body change, you know. I kind of realized, wow, this world is a world of an artist. God is an artist. If there is a God, it's an artist. Because art doesn't need to have an explanation for why it's here. Do you see? We have to, I find, access to at least two states of being. Excuse me. Every human being must access what I like to call their true nature. You know, your true nature has nothing to do with what the outer world teaches you. It is so direct that once you wonder about how to experience your true nature, you already realize it's already being experienced. It's just an undescribable thing. And if you're wise enough not to want to describe it, not to want to, if you're wise enough to not want your hand to grab everything that it sees from the unknown, then you begin having a sort of faith in an intelligence. How can I tell you? As if my intuition, that it has come across in different ways, as if there's been moments where it's been an emergency and suddenly it's been like a command, like a command coming into my mind and an instantaneous knowing of a certain response. And there's been moments where it's as if like the intuition was coming across as if like I didn't need to know anything about the unknown because I was the unknown moving knowledge. Do you see? And that's kind of how you experience the Tao. That the Tao of now is how there is something here before our ideas. It is pre-thought, but it is present. You know? So one state is your true nature, and the other state is very hilarious. It is one where from your state of you, from your true nature, you allow an idea of self to take shape situationally for an efficient contribution to the species advancement. And this is very hard for me to say. Pretty much I'm like pumping people up, you know, for the greatness of the species, but the species doesn't have proper organizational patterns. You know, it doesn't have a certain way, as if like if the species was a kid and we were like, hey kid, if we gave you $1 million, what are you going to do with it? That kid would have no answer. You know, it's like no wise answer. Do you see? So I find that we have to at least first, you know, if there's a mess inside your house, you clean it, then you go clean the messes outside your house. So we have to realign society, and we have to realize that we can have global groups of experts constantly reshaping an aspect of civilization and then making a suggestion to everybody, and then there being a majority vote for that change to happen. Because a lot of things, it's as if we still imagine, like, you know, we as humans in the future elect a computer president, an artificial intelligent president, and this artificially intelligent president in 1 year of office completely fixes all the problems of the world and all markets, you know. And just by the mere ability to be able to change something, when someone can do something better than you, it gives you hope that you can do it better. It might bring emotions of like you feeling like, you know, like, oh man, I want to do it as good as like that guy, you know. But it's, how can I tell you, life is too short to try to be somebody that you were never meant to be. And those are the saddest moments in life. I've experienced them. I've experienced them in ways where I've made a decision and I thought it was a great decision, and then I found myself, you know, gazing at the edge of ignorance, you know. I think it's very important. Spirituality is it's misinterpreted on a mass scale because it has been closely linked to superstition. Because instead of us realizing that we can have a new approach, we have chosen to keep painting pictures from the past. There's some moments where I feel like I'm alive, but I'm not living. And there are moments when I am living, I find that death could never catch up. Because the moment you glance, you get a sense of your non-physically based presence, you kind of calm down, you relax, you realize the universe is being intelligent right beside you. And that's kind of tapping into this Tao where you no longer need symbols to protect you from the unknown. You require clarity from within through a self-confirmed experience. You got to be interested in experiences more than concepts to truly reach somewhere. Because let me tell you, these talks I give, you know, I find myself listening to them at random times, different times, and the way at least it comes across to me, I find like as if I'm realizing how many selves, how many days I've had where I've had that sort of viewpoint and it's changed. Not only the people around you change, but the person you think you are changes too. And this isn't kind of, I guess, technique to render yourself a sort of serene peacefulness by realizing that the concept of self and the concept of other are based. Once you just realize this mutual dependency in a lot of concepts, you cannot fear darkness, because darkness cannot exist in meaning without the light. Earlier I spoke about my iced tea bottle. And I guess I'll tell you a nice story. This imperial warrior, this warrior who's like he's undefeated in the battlefield. Pretty much this guy would translate into a giant robot, like in an Iron Man movie. This is how undefeated this warrior is. This is an ancient Zen story though. And so this warrior, after killing people, so many people, and being undefeated, one day he just wonders. It's like a light bulb goes in his head, and he's like, "Oh my God, where do all these people go?" He kills them. And at the time there was people entertained the idea of heaven and hell, right? So this guy begins wondering. He's like, what are these people going to heaven and hell? Am I going to go to heaven and hell? I've killed a lot of people. I'm probably going to go to hell, but what is heaven and hell? So this guy begins wondering, this warrior, and so he tells his assistant, let's call his assistant Billy, and this like ancient, imperial Zen warrior at the time looks at Billy and he's like, Billy, go find somebody who I can ask this deep question from. Billy comes back after going to town, and asking some people, and it comes and says to this great warrior, the ancient warrior. Billy can be said to be a time traveler if the story needs to be congruent, But what happens is the assistant comes back. He tells the warrior, there's in this mountain, there's a wise sage, and if you go there you will find your answers. There's an enlightened sage there. So this warrior is like, okay, and just like how a giant robot, steps, this warrior just steps. Eventually he finds himself at the door of the, house of the sage, the monastery or whatever of the sage, you know. And he just goes in. He goes in and he sees a bunch of people, monks in robes, all have drinking tea, and there's a monk at the head of the, room there, and that monk's drinking tea, and he's like the Zen master, the enlightened sage. This warrior doesn't even care, like he doesn't even, he just opens the door, goes in, and just like goes in front of the sage. And just the sage is just like about to drink his tea, and the sage stops and looks at this guy, and this guy just without even asking or showing any politeness or anything, he says, "Sage, tell me now, what is heaven and hell?" And because he has his imperial warrior armor, everybody, like all the people, like are quiet and saying nothing, And so the sage, so the warrior says, "Tell me, what is heaven and hell, sage?" You know. And the sage, drinks from, takes a sip from his cup of tea, and he looks at this warrior, this like, you know, um, fierce warrior, and he says, "You're too stupid to understand. Like, I'm not making this up. The sage insults the guy. He says, "You're too much of a goon and a wild animal for me to tell you this," Something like this, right? And this warrior is he just the moment he hears the insult and it just registers in his mind, he just takes his sword, raises it into the air with his one hand, like his one hand is as strong as two hands, you know. And he's about to, you know, in some sense, kill the sage. And right before the sword hits the head of the sage, you know, the sage just takes a sip from his, you know, tea again, and he just smiles at the guy and says, "This is hell." And then the sword stops right above the head of the Zen master, and the Zen master is just smiling and staring at the sky. And this, you know, fierce warrior suddenly, something like as if this force is holding his hand. He can't kill the sage, and he just thinks about the response, and he's like, "Oh my God, anger and rage is me creating my own hell." And he suddenly just drops the sword, bows down in front of the sage because he made him realize. And the sage smiles and looks at him and says, "This is heaven." And so for the first time, this being of immense violence and intensity, he realizes that it's about gentleness and sensitivity to life. And then the Zen master is like, "All right, you know, come and join us, bro. Like, have a cup of tea." You know, imagine the Zen master is from Queens. Damn, I couldn't do the accent probably. But anyways, so the idea there was that there's a sort of your free will is responsible for the reality it enters in, but also the reality it is indirectly or subconsciously creating through the different patterns it has received of how the world is to be. You know, and these patterns can be updated by the self. And the self is an awareness. And awareness is undescribable. And it goes into this elegance where your truth shifts from this pattern having to make sense with all patterns into one of a sort of, you know, this might sound a bit corny, but it's honestly, it's like this sort of nostalgic divine remembrance, you know. And it has a sort of beauty that's undescribable because it is in the transparency of the ego. You kind of see how your intelligence is already being maintained, and there's a sort of grace to a sort of intelligent harmonious flow. I don't know how to tell you. It's like there's a divine quality when you see things in alignment in a way where it's not condition based, it's unconditional. You know, when somebody needs help and some other person from all the conditions in their life lets go of those conditions and unconditionally comes and helps that being, like that tell me, is that not of an does that not seem of an advanced mind? A person who has realized enlightenment is not a behavioral thing to have a sort of behavioral result in some sense. Enlightenment is a realization that your greatest self is your world because the mind is being all that is now. So isn't it strange that people are saying, like, they are individualizing themselves. They're taking ownership not only for their physical body, but their physical body is maintained by the idea of themselves. And the idea of themselves seems to be in the mind, and the mind seems to be the whole moment. So it's as if we are the whole moment, but also a further ability to be a certain relationship with the world. You know, as if when the ape kind of it became self-aware, it separated itself from the world. It's like, this is me, this is the world, right? There was a sort of individuality that occurred because this creature, a lot of animals don't have this self-awareness. You know, they do, but they don't have it through that sort of time. That means animals experience time differently. You don't see your dog depressed that it's going to die in like 10 years or something, you know. So you see animals have a different experience of time. So time seems to be a sort of tool being wielded by the hand of man. And so again, if time is being wielded by the hand of man, suddenly the free will finds itself a sort of god of its own thoughts, as if your attention is where your free will has options to choose from. So it becomes the study of attention. And attention is, the beautiful thing is, it is to a locality, but it is from a non-locality. This is why at the edge of our attention within our eyes, we are all that is in some playful sense, because it is a sort of unknown unification, as if we're constantly oscillating between emptiness and fullness, between the known and the unknown, and we don't realize it. Because we have allowed only self-awareness or consciousness to be present through the physical body. There isn't even a question of people wondering what if there's an aspect of themselves that is a body in a higher dimension, and then this body in a higher dimension has nothing to do with the body in the lower dimension, because it is more like how an onion holds layers of itself within. I find that that's the sort of multidimensionality we're kind of experiencing, as if the whole world is found in your eyes. So when knowledge stares at the unknown, it is no longer just the same old knowledge. Whenever you try to experience something, you actually go through an experience. It's never the same you. And if anybody who's listening right now, if you're familiar with Terence McKenna's work, his whole thing about psychedelics was that at least the psychedelic is giving you an experience that it's kind of like showing you there could be another reality, so you're no longer just based on the previous reality. So it is in some sense a game of reality, and sometimes it's all about being able to confront a sort of chaotic loneliness of the soul, where it's as if like, oh God, this is very hard to explain, and I think I shouldn't explain it. But maybe something I could say, it's like the truth, if you're looking for it, will make you feel everything you do is a sort of illusion. So it's about where your attention is positioning truth. For certain wise sages, for now, one person that comes to mind is Shri Prabhupada from the Hare Krishna movement. Somebody in one of those videos was asking him, Shri Prabhupada, how can I get enlightened? How long does it take to get enlightened? And Shri Prabhupada looks at that follower and he says, right now, just with an intensity. He says, right now if you want. Because it is something that its instantaneous presence is the proof of its divinity, of its existence, is the proof of its divinity. What if what is looking through your eyes was never any idea? What if it was never an idea, never an emotion, never a shape, never being able to divide it, as if there can never be a body, mind, soul. There can never be a past, present, future. There's just the prime being. That's a good way of saying it. Anyways, thanks for listening. I feel I should end the talk here, but if there's any questions or anything anybody wants to ask or bring up, let's give some Q&A time. Time conquers all, and truth conquers time. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll leave you off with what Plato said. As above, so below. The truths without are already within. Much blessings and namaste.